fellow Trek Chatters, I'm Pit Trekkie, and welcome to another episode of Pittsburgh's Trek Chat. So for today's episode, what I'm going to be doing is reviewing episode 4 of season 2 of Star Trek Picard, titled Watcher. So the episode begins with Picard and Jurati. They actually go to, the ship, the La Sirena, actually crash landed right outside Chateau Picard in the previous episode. So they go into the house, they find it ruined and abandoned. Picard knows, though, that the history is that the Nazis actually used that as a base during World War II, and that the Picards actually hid in the tunnels underneath the house. And they actually escaped to England, but the house had remained in the family, and eventually the Picards ended up coming back to France and took over the house, but that was centuries later. But anyway, during the time when he's telling her about the history of the house, he notices that Jurati moves 15 beads on an abacus, picks up the 15th volume of the Encyclopedia Britannica, and picks up a Pinot Noir wine from 1915. So they assume that the number 15 has some sort of meaning. Through elimination, basically, what they found is that it was April 12th, the date of 2024, when the ship had crashed. So they have 3 days. April 15th, they assume, is the day that the divergence is going to happen in time. So this is where the stories kind of start splitting up. So Picard ends up getting beamed to the coordinates that Dr. Jurati had gotten from the Borg Queen's mind about where the Watcher is. He ends up beaming to Forward Avenue and 10-4, the 10-4 bar where he had met Guinan in the normal time in the early 25th century. Goes into the bar, he actually encounters a younger Guinan. Guinan has no idea who he is, and this Guinan's very, very different from what we've seen of Guinan before. Very cynical, just disillusioned with humanity and disillusioned with the world around her, what she's seeing with humanity destroying the planet and all of the racism going on. Well, we find out that her bar is closing, and she basically is going to be leaving the Earth because of everything that she sees around her. She keeps trying to find out who Picard is, but Picard won't tell her exactly who he is, just that he knows that she's El-Orian and he's from the future, and that he believes that she's the Watcher. She keeps saying, "I'm not the Watcher." She shows him a little bit of what 21st century Earth is like. She shows basically homeless living right outside a mission. She and Picard actually donate food to this mission. And she keeps telling Picard, "I'm not this Watcher," and she hopes that he finds what he's looking for. He finally tells Guinan who he is, and she doesn't come out and say that she actually recognizes him, but as soon as she hears the name, she brings him into her vehicle and goes and helps him to find out who one of the Watchers are. She says that there are supervisors around the planet, and actually around the galaxy, who are almost like guardian angels or watchers for different types of people throughout the galaxy and on Earth. So they end up meeting one of the Watchers, and Picard is led through a series of, I guess, hosts of this alien Watcher to a human who actually looks like Laris. So Picard's story ends up ending with them disappearing somewhere. Then we got the other story going on with 7 of 9 and Raffi. They're trying to find what happened to Rios. They go to the clinic where Rios had been treated, find out from one of Teresa's nurses, I guess you would say, that the doctor and Rios were taken by ICE and detained. They go to the police station. Raffi's trying to find out from a police officer where Rios is, but she has nothing to do with where Rios is at. So they sit down, and a gentleman had overheard their conversation and said that Rios would have been detained by ICE. So Raffi and 7 of 9 Raffi, we should say, breaks into a police car to use the computer. She uses a phaser to break in with the window by destroying the window, which I thought was actually pretty cool. They find out that Rios has been detained. The police are starting to come out of the building, so 7 of 9 gets into the car with Raffi, and 7 of 9 ends up taking them basically on a ride through Los Angeles trying to get to Rios. They're being chased by the police. They ask Jurati for assistance in being able to find Rios and be transported to where Rios is at, this detention center. during this process, they find out that Rios is actually being boarded onto a bus and being moved to a sanctuary district near the Mexico border. This kind of brings in Dr. Girardi's story. So Dr. Girardi, after Picard leaves, goes back to the La Sirena, and she's having some back and forth discussions with the Borg Queen. The Borg Queen, as previously established in the last episode, has been very impressed with Girardi and her skills. And she actually tells Girardi that, and she plays on this with Girardi, that she knows Dr. Girardi doesn't like to be alone and wants to be a part of something and likes order. And she says to Girardi that she knows that she likes assimilation, cooperation, connection, and that she's been longing for that her whole life. And so basically, Girardi, because 7 and 9 and Raffi need to get to Rios, but the transporter's not working quite properly yet on board the La Sirena, she asks the Borg Queen for help, knowing the Borg Queen could fix the transporter a lot faster. Of course, this being the Borg Queen, she wants to know what she would get in return. And Girardi basically says, me. If you help me with this and and I can trust you with this, I will talk to you and tell you about basically my entire life. So the Queen actually helps get the transporter fixed, beams 7 and 9 and Raffi to coordinates where Rios' bus is going to be coming, taking him to the sanctuary district. And that's basically where their story ends. Girardi, on the other hand, again kind of tricks the Queen. She basically completely ignores her after she thanks the Queen for her help, which seems to infuriate the Queen. That's where Girardi's story ends. Now, backing up Rios' story to what he was doing in this episode. So, after he was captured by ICE at the medical facility, he and the doctor are taken to an ICE detention center, photographed. Rios actually sees one of the ICE guards how cruel he's being to one of the detainees, and when Rios actually points this out, the guard actually tasers him at this point. Shortly after that, Rios is having a brief discussion with the doctor about, you know, what he's seeing in these detention centers. You can tell, obviously, that they have some sort of romantic connection is continuing to bud. He finds out, Rios, that he's being transferred, being put onto a bus. Of course, this ICE security guard has been kind of badgering him and the other detainees. So Rios decides, oh, what the heck, I'm going to tell him the truth about who I am, after the guard asks him about his identification. So he tells him his name and actually tells him the truth, which is the ironic part, tells him the truth about being the captain of the USS Stargazer and what their current mission is to repair the timeline. And of course, this being the 21st century, the security guard doesn't believe Rios. So Rios ends up getting boarded onto the bus with the other detainees to head to the sanctuary district. And again, the guard makes fun of him and says, "See you around, Captain." And you can see the anger in Rios' face, and you can see it in one of the other detainees as well. But the other thing you can see in Rios' face is he's plotting something. So I'm sure it's some sort of escape, or he's going to want to try to hit this guy or do something to get back at him for the way he's been treated by this guy. So, and that was the episode as a whole. So there were definitely some likes that I really enjoyed about this. At the very beginning of the episode, 7 and 9 and Raffi are on board a bus heading to the medical facility where they were able to track Rios to. And they come across the punk from Star Trek IV, blasting his boombox, still looking with the orange mohawk. This time he's got an orange beard. And playing, I guess you can call it the sequel song to I Hate You, which he actually wrote for Star Trek IV. I think this song was called I Still Hate You, but the difference was when 7 and 9 told him to turn down the noise, this time he actually complied and shut down, which hinted at that he remembers Spock giving him the Vulcan nerve pinch in Star Trek IV when he was told to shut down the noise. So that was a very nice little touch. I also really liked the fact that we got to learn a little bit more about Picard and the family history. One of my buddy from college, he and I do a podcast together called Captain's Logs and Lightsabers. It's on the Geek News Network. And he actually pointed out to me, I had missed this, that it was actually a little bit of an explanation finally as to why Picard is French, but he has a British accent. And we kind of figured, he told me this episode explained it, and he's totally right about it, about how the family left to go to England during the time of World War II, and then finally came back to France several centuries later and took back over the chateau. So that was a cool little piece of, I guess, a little bit of Trek history that we've never learned of before. I also really love the chemistry, not about between 7 and 9 and Raffi, I do, but really I love the camaraderie and the chemistry between Michelle Hurd and Jerry Ryan. Their scenes together are top-notch and they're absolutely hysterical. Whether you want to see the two characters playing as they're in a relationship or they're just friends, they're like Laurel and Hardy together, just constantly like making sarcastic comments and jokes. The one moment that I particularly enjoyed was when Raffi was yelling at the police officer, and the police officer really couldn't help her. Who would have thought of all characters, it would have been 7 and 9 to actually step up and use a little bit of human control and social skills to actually diffuse the situation and tell the police officer, "Thank you for your time, we appreciate it, you're doing a wonderful job." Never would have thought of that when you saw 7 and 9 in Voyager. So it really shows how much 7 and 9 has grown in the 20 years since Voyager's come home from the Delta Quadrant. But anyway, those two ladies have excellent chemistry together. Their scenes in the car when Raffi broke into the car by destroying the window with the phaser. Raffi saying how good that felt, even though 7 and 9 said you could have just used your tricorder to open the car. Just an excellent moment between the two of them. The other thing that I really liked is there's continuing tie-ins to the Sanctuary District story arc from Past Tense Parts 1 and 2 from the Deep Space Nine third season. Who knows what we're going to be seeing more of. We still have just a little bit over half a season to go. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how the Sanctuary Districts kind of tie in, especially since Sanctuary Districts are actually real in today's 2022 life. The other thing that I thought was really interesting about the episode was Guinan in the 21st century. I will be honest with all of you, at first when I saw how cynical Guinan was and miserable, I didn't like it. I thought that it was totally against the character of Guinan, but I've watched the episode 3 times in preparation for this episode, and now I kind of get where Guinan is coming from. It's a different spin. So we don't know the exact reasons why Guinan came to Earth, and we know she's been on Earth since at least the late 1800s because we saw her in Time Zero interacting with Samuel Clemens at a party. All right, so and knowing Guinan, she obviously saw something special about humanity. But after being on Earth for over a century and a half, and she's seeing, and she even comments on this in the episode with Picard about the racism that's going on, how humanity is destroying the planet by polluting it, just the cruelty of humanity. She's finally lost hope and the belief that they can better themselves. And it's actually Picard who's saying, and he had an excellent line in the episode where he said, "Change doesn't come as quickly as we want." And that really seemed to hit Guinan in the mind. And we don't know what's going to happen with Guinan. I mean, I'm assuming she's going to stay on Earth. She was getting ready to leave, obviously. And but I think she's going to take Picard's words to heart. We might even see that in the end of the season, in the season finale. Maybe he'll see Guinan at the end of the episode and say, "See, I told you humanity would change." Or maybe she'll, and vice versa, and she'll say, "You know what, Picard, you were absolutely right. I'm glad I never gave up on humanity the way I did." So it was an interesting spin on Guinan's character. For the first time, we actually saw her as the pessimist rather than the optimist who tried to help people through their problems. Very, very interesting. All right. I also really enjoy the continuing interaction between Dr. Jurati and the Borg Queen. Of course, the Borg Queen is trying to lure Dr. Jurati for her own means. We don't know exactly what that is yet, but she definitely knows that Dr. Jurati is very much seeking out being one, being part of something, which obviously the Borg collective is. Everybody is part of one big, large groupthink. And are all one, and everybody cooperates no matter what. And so she's trying to tap into that with Dr. Jurati, but Dr. Jurati still seems to be one step ahead of her as of now in terms of shutting her down and using her to get what she wants to help her friends. But I'm very curious of what's going to happen with Dr. Girardi. Is she actually going to eventually allow herself to become part of the Borg Collective, at least with the Queen, at some point? Are they going to become connected in some way? The other little thing that I liked, my wife and I really loved the show Impractical Jokers. So when we saw the character of Uncle Dale come in, and it was Brian Quinn, otherwise known as Q, from that show, I got so excited because I didn't know if he was a big Star Trek fan or not, but I know that he's been getting into little acting roles. So getting him get to see him interact with Guinan and be in a scene with Patrick Stewart, I thought was wonderful. As a matter of fact, after I watched the episode for the first time, I actually tweeted Brian Quinn and told him how great I thought it was seeing him in the show and how much I thought it was great that he was now part of the Star Trek community. He actually tweeted me back. It's actually right here. Here's what he tweeted back to me. And he basically said how surreal it was to actually know that he's now part of the Star Trek history, part of the Star Trek franchise, even if it's just a tiny little bit. So I thought that that was wonderful. I'm glad that he can actually say he's part of the Star Trek community now. The other thing I really enjoyed was the irony of Rios telling the ICE officer the truth. Obviously, he knew that it was going to be completely I don't know what the word is, like not displaced, but dismissed is the word I'm looking for. It was going to be dismissed as some sort of fantasy or some sort of like mentally ill kind of ramblings. So it was I just enjoyed the irony of it, that in the story, what he was actually telling them was true. He felt like, what do I got to lose, you know? So those were a lot of the likes that I enjoyed about the episode. The dislikes, there were really no dislikes. It was more of like question marks. I wasn't sure exactly how to feel. So obviously in the episode, the writers decided that they were going to show ICE as completely villainous. All right. Now, I'm not going to be getting into politics, things of that nature, but the writers clearly took a stand on how they feel about ICE. All right. So here's my thought on the whole thing. It's kind of like the whole situation with the police. I don't believe every police officer is bad, just like I don't believe every ICE officer is bad. They're very, very tough jobs. They're very, very thankless jobs, unfortunately. There are people that have to keep law and order, and it can be a dirty job sometimes, unfortunately. And I don't like the fact that the whole is being demonized. It basically blanketed all of ICE as just nothing but a bad organization. And that's kind of what I see a lot of times with the police as well. And really, no matter what job you have, you're always going to have those select few that are going to take advantage of the power that they've been given and abuse other people. I don't like seeing people abused. I don't like seeing people getting killed. Star Trek has always been about talking about political issues and storytelling. This one was a little bit different. Usually Star Trek tells a moral lesson through different storytelling and through allegory. This time it was just very blunt, right in your face. So I wasn't really exactly sure how to take that. So that's why I'm not calling it a like or a dislike. I have it in my notes as more of a question mark. How do I want to feel about this? And as time goes on, I watch the episode a little bit more. I'll be thinking about it more and more. But anyway, I'm just going to leave it at that. So what this episode did was leave me some questions. So first of all, who is the human-looking Laris? So this is supposed to be the Watcher that Guinan was supposed to set Picard up with. Now, I want to give a side note here. First of all, is this actually Laris? Is Laris really one of these Watchers or one of these supervisors, and maybe she's disguised as a Romulan in the future? Or is this just a Watcher that kind of just happens to look like Laris, or is kind of given Laris's image to kind of connect with Picard? I don't know. Now, I want to give this as a side note. I didn't pick up on this my first watching of the episode. But of course, I went on Twitter and I kind of read what other people were thinking about it, and somebody said something that really shocked me. When Guinan was talking about the supervisors who were planted on Earth and in like other regions, I guess around the galaxy, to protect other people, what does that sound like? Does anybody remember the character of Gary Seven from the second season finale of the original series, Assignment Earth? He was Supervisor 194, codenamed Gary 7, and we find out that he was a descendant of humans that were taken from Earth 6,000 years earlier. They would be trained up to and put them in key areas in the timeline or on Earth to keep something drastic from happening that would change the course of humanity forever. And so I'm wondering if they're all tied in. I can't see at this point how they wouldn't be, based on how they were described in the episode. I'm really hoping that we get a lot more about that. I think that would be really exciting to kind of see an Assignment Earth build up from that story arc that happened 55 years ago. Here's the big question that people don't know. How on earth did Guinan not recognize Picard? Because it was established in Time Zero Part 2, in 6th season of Next Generation, that they had met. She even said to Picard, "See you in 500 years." So when I watched the episode, I was like, what on earth is going on here? That's a big continuity glitch. But I've been reading what has been said by some of the writers and some of the fans on Facebook and Twitter, and they had talked a lot about how this Picard is coming back from the Confederation, which means there wouldn't have been a Picard from the Federation who would have actually interacted with Guinan. So that kind of makes sense to me. But then the only other confusion that I really had is going back to the punk on the bus. You know, they made it very clear that his reaction to 7 and 9 when she told him to take off or turn down the music or turn down the noise, that it was impacted by what Spock had done to him on the bus. They didn't say it in words, but it was heavily insinuated that that's what that was about. So I don't really know how to rectify this. Time travel is a headache in Star Trek. Captain Janeway even said it in one episode of Voyager. It didn't ruin my love of the episode, but it was just something that a lot of the fandom had actually pointed out. And I'm one of those fans that really likes to adhere to canon and continuity. So I don't know. But anyway, I still enjoyed the episode. So here was the last thing. There was an epilogue to this episode, all right, where there's this blonde woman coming out of Jackson Roy Kirk Plaza. And if anybody of you don't know who Jackson Roy Kirk is, in the 2nd season episode of the original series, The Changeling, we find out that the Nomad probe was actually created in the early 2000s by a scientist named Jackson Roy Kirk. And then Nomad had been launched, and then eventually merged with the probe called Tonru, and became the Nomad that we saw in the episode. All right, but anyway, back to the blonde girl. She's walking out and reading a Dixon Hill novel. Q's having this little soliloquy or little talk with himself, kind of directed at her, and he was going to try to kind of, I don't know, modify her thoughts or make her feel fearful about something, and he snaps his fingers, and all she does is laugh. And he snaps his fingers again and is like, well, this is unfortunate. So what happened? What happened to Q? Did he lose his powers? Did Q continue to take his powers away? It was insinuated in the 2nd episode of the season that there's something that's not right with Q. Maybe he's sick in some way or something's changing with him. So maybe that's a sign of what's happening, but it certainly surprised Q. That being said, the last thing I want to talk about is we've been seeing in the last 2 episodes about the Europa mission. We've been seeing signs about that, and Q is obviously wearing a coat with a Europa mission badge on it. And underneath it says to boldly go. I think that's what it says, completely. So I hadn't been thinking much about what the Europa mission is going to be, but obviously it's going to play a part in the 2nd half of this season. And I'm wondering, this is just a theory, I'm wondering if that is the divergence. Is there something important about this Europa mission that if it does happen or it doesn't happen, that's the divergence that's going to change? All the Queen said in episode 2 was it was a small change, a small divergence. And I really do, and I'm wondering wholeheartedly at this point now if it's based on the Europa mission. So we'll see what happens as the episodes go on. So anyway, those are my thoughts about episode 4 of season 2 of Star Trek Picard, Watcher. Please, down below, give some thoughts or feedback what you thought about the episode, about the character stories, what had happened with Ice, what had happened with Guinan, what the possibility of the Europa mission is, what's going on with Q, who's this blonde-haired girl that we're seeing. All right, and I'm going to hopefully find some of these messages and answers out. I'm going to be going and watching episode 5 here very shortly after I'm done filming. So You can follow the show here on YouTube. Just type in the Pittsburgh's Trek Chat in the search engine. It'll take you directly to my channel. You can also follow the show on Facebook, facebook.com/Pittsburgh's Trek Chat. You can also follow the show on Twitter at PGH Trek Chat. I'm looking forward to next episode. Until then, may yins live long and prosper.